Not even the money.
I'm smiling, but my jaw is actually dropping.
Actually,
because of the revelations that I'm getting behind the scene. As we get into this discussion, it's quite alarming. The revelations that are going to be made here in morning at NTV, looking into universities' responses over expired courses. Good morning to you once again. My name is Priscilla Regina Nalwoga. Now, earlier this week, National Council of Higher Education released a list of expired courses following a case of a Ugandan student, actually, who was denied entry into one of the foreign universities on the basis of the course being outdated. Now, this has definitely generated debate here and there. Earlier on this week, on Monday to be exact, we had pundits to speak into this, especially in regards to the National Council of Higher Education, what its mandate is, and also the social protection of the end user. Anyway, the Ministry of Education, through JC Muyingo, who's the state minister, outlined some of the challenges to this point, of course, coming down to limited financing, resources, and human resources also. But also Parliament has had its reservations on the issue through the Deputy Speaker, Thomas Tayebwa, and as we speak this morning, we do have a parliamentary committee that is going to start a probe into this particular matter. However, we want to hear the voices of the university proprietors and leaders this morning as we continue to investigate this story. One of them that is joining us is Professor Mouhammed Mpezamihigo, who's the Vice Chancellor of Kampala International University. You're most welcome, Professor.
Good morning, Priscilla. Good morning, our viewers. Thank you so much for hosting us today.
Okay. Yeah. All right. And of course, next to him is Dr. Lawrence Mugaga, who is the Vice Chancellor, Victoria University. Good morning to you, Dr.
Good morning, Priscilla, viewers, good morning. Thank you for tuning in. Delighted to be here.
Okay, so let's start off where we were before we got into air. I was asking these gentlemen in regards to the programs that they offer, and I was asking them which programs do they currently have under the National Council of Higher Education that are supposed to be having review, but also which are the new programs that they had submitted to get accreditation and approval for their universities. Let me start with the professor. How many new programs had you so far submitted, and what your earliest submission dates, how far back?
Thank you so much. Maybe to put flesh to the question, really, there are quite a number of new programs that have been, with the National Council. Some, of course, are with the institution where we have submitted and we haven't yet received, the permission in terms of, not permission really, but feedback in terms of saying, look, this is what has happened, this is what is going to happen. On the other hand, there are other programs where they have been able to fast track the accreditation process. But our viewers need to understand, really, what it involves. A curriculum, first of all, belongs to the university. It is the university that sits, puts its experts together, puts content, makes a logical flow of what they are going to deliver, and also set the terms within the curriculum, and then submit it to the regulator, in this case, the National Council for Higher Education. So if I'm going to run medicine, for example, 5 years or 5.5, I determine as such and then submit to the National Council, and then the National Council takes it for what they call desk review. They involve experts, and after some time, they now say we would like to come and verify your facilities. So that's the way the curriculum does. Now, within the curriculum, the owners of the curriculum, who are the institutions, propose reviews, periodic reviews. So that's the real gist of the matter. And the review is just to update the program on latest developments in that particular field. And once it is accredited, our understanding is that the institution, still as the mother of the program, should be allowed more time for a cycle. 5 years of medicine, we should allow, not every student who joins from year 1 will complete in the 5th year, for various reasons, financial, social, there will be mobility issues. Now, after the 5 years, those who will have completed need to do internship 1 more year. That makes it 6. After internship, they are registered as doctors. So allow them maybe 2 to 3 years to be in the field. The university should conduct a tracer study, try to see whether the curriculum offered and the quality of doctors trained have actually done a good job or there are gaps. Now that is the meaning of the review, and that's where our headache of expiry has come from. Otherwise, the curriculum of medicine will have received accreditation and therefore can run. And because it's a very tedious exercise, like you have said, the money that is involved, the assessments, the evaluations that are required before you come back and say, inform the regulator that, look, I think I need 25% improvement, I need to remove redundancies. That's the understanding our viewers should now, first of all, appreciate before we actually import this terminology of expiry.
Okay, so now to answer the question, how many programs and the earliest submission that you've had that is still pending at the hands of the council?
They are intense. I mean, they are really intense because I don't have the exact number, but we are actually trying to do a full assessment, because what was shocking is actually, whereas the social media news that was published was picked from a certain story, and the National Council has actually said, please disregard that. They have issued their own statement. But if you go to the National Council for Higher Education portal, that information is tallying, you know, from that story, because we did a search for Kampala International University, and you find what the courses that are indicated as active and those that are expired. So what is happening now, we are trying to see and also work with the National Council and actually tell them, look, some of these courses that are listed on your portal are not offered by the university. Some have been duplicated as active and expiry. Some that we are offering that are accredited are not featured on the database. So that becomes the issue. So they have several programs. Like recently, we submitted more than 15 programs. They've been with them for a while. And we are expecting...
And the while, that's a year, 2 years?
There are some that lasted years, that's for sure. Yeah, and people also forget that between 2020 and 2021, when we had a lockdown, the National Council froze the entire process of accreditation and gave us the opportunity to apply for the emergency open distance and e-learning system. So did they also take into consideration the period of 2 years where they froze accreditation? Do those 2 years also still count, or they are minused? So even when they are trying to update the website, it would be advisable for them to consider that period, not a justification for people to continue offering programs that are not regularly reviewed, but it's a point for them also to consider.
Okay, well, that's definitely a new development. Now, Dr. Mugaga, in regards to the process and the cost of the process that the university actually goes through to get accreditation and renewal of some of these courses, what does that look like for you? Because as we have come to know, that you pay up to the tune of about 800,000 shillings per program to get the accreditation. However, we're meant to understand there's inspection fees, there's a 40% that is on top of the final bill that you're given. Talk to us about those nitty-gritty expenses.
Yeah, thank you, Priscilla, and viewers, and Professor Mpezamihigo. He has really articulated this entire process. Honestly, the cost, if you asked every institution, the cost is not the problem. No. How we wish the cost would be incurred, but then they return whatever we are asking them on time. So that rarely happens. But there are a few things we are dealing with. So if you're looking at the cost, for example, if you submit a program, you are expected to pay. That is if they have scheduled, they are scheduling an inspection to come in. They are going to cost it, say, 700,000 per program, and then of course they add in their administration fees, which is 40% of that figure, and then later on the inspectors themselves. That's of course another.
But and the inspectors and administration.
You would want to believe that, right? Yeah, but we are giving, yes, of course there is always the perceived situation and the real world. So, but that is not the problem. The problem is a situation where you have to submit programs and you have to wait for a year or even 2. If you're lucky, you have gotten even a preliminary response. If you are very unlucky, it will remain silent. But I am also a believer that you cannot milk a cow you're not feeding. right? So when you look at National Council as an organization itself, it is so stretched, very depleted. You expect them to also inspect the entire country. Institutions, if you saw that fake document that was going around, right? Maybe to clarify, like Professor said, it has never been issued by National Council for Higher Education. It has never been issued by Cambridge University as one may want. I hope the probe, actually, the parliamentary probe should look into this. And we find this person who is so anti-Ugandans to this extent that put that document out.
But that anti-Ugandanism is acting to your advantage.
The challenge, yes, they have succeeded on one thing, to get us talking. But we are talking the wrong things. There are things we should be talking about. For example, everyone is saying, you meet someone on the street and they know you, they say, are you sure my degree is still valid?
Yeah, because
right?
all the phone calls I've been making
yes.
this week, first wait, is your degree valid?
Exactly. But the truth is that degree will never expire. Even the word expiry is not part of the conversation, should not be. We should be worried about actually whatever we are doing, is it fitting in the times we are in, or are we preparing these students for the future? Because some of the people who are worried about their degrees to be expired, they are seated with them at home. So if that's what you call expiry, maybe. But can we think of different solutions? For example, to me, the conversation I would want to have is that we live in a time where we have to take education to people. Now, you also have National Council through the accreditation process, even within the curriculum, when they review it, they are telling you, you must have physical facilities. But the people are where? Far away from the institution. And they would prefer to have a physical library where no one will even ever come to sit.
True.
All right? They are going to ask you so many things that you realize are no longer relevant with the times we are in. That's the conversation we are talking about.
There must be a system and structure review at the National Council itself in how they administer.
Exactly. I hope the act that is being reviewed is going to touch these things. Okay. But right now, the things we are really paying attention to are not helping Ugandans. Ugandans, the degrees they have, so many are seated home with them. So they will never expire, yes, but you may also sit with them to do nothing with them. Therefore, we need to find a way of revamping a degree program that we offer, and then we have to look at this kind of centralization of power in terms of, Professor Mpezamihigo talked about it, like the curriculum is owned by the institution. The National Council or government, yes, they are there to really oversee what we do, but we also, this is our core business. This is our passion. We care about Ugandans and what we have to offer. And if we offer poor quality degrees, it is to our disadvantage. So we cannot afford to be disseminating, issuing very irrelevant degrees. So we wake up every day, we consult, we fight every day to make sure that a Ugandan child who comes to the gates of Victoria University, for example, receives a degree that is going to add value to them, and then they will add value to society. So those are the conversations we should be having.
Actually, I would like to, Priscilla, I would like to our viewers to do a little flashback. You know, the qualifications, National Council for Higher Education was established by the Act in 2001. The Secretariat became operational in 2003. I'm privileged to have served 2 terms on the Council between 2007 and 2017. So I have a bit of history within the National Council. Now, prior to 2001, this is an interesting conversation. Some of us belong to that generation where there was no obvious regulation. So we were 10 degrees, we qualified, and now between 2003 to date, we have got a regulator. A regulator is supposed to moderate what we are doing to ensure compliance and so on and so forth. I look forward to a time when institutions of higher education in Uganda will actually have self-regulation.
Correct.
So we need to mature from that point. But our headache, the national headlines now, is the use of the word expiry.
Expiry.
A regulator is actually mandated to regulate within a legal framework. Now, as we speak today, there is nothing, there is no terminology, expiry, in the regulation of higher education institutions. There is only accreditation. So what should happen? The National Council, in the review they are going to do maybe of their own regulations, statutory instruments, should be able to categorize, if for review, if an institution reviews its curriculum to a certain percentage, then that review is minimal, let's say 25%. If you review your curriculum up to 50%, then that calls for another re-inspection.
Right.
That becomes really more or less an overhaul of a program. It might even include the change of name. At the moment, the country is undergoing review of all the curricula at the primary school level, secondary school level. Universities are also talking. So it's us to decide how we remain relevant in the marketplace. But the scare should be removed. I think National Council, well, and we thank the ED, she has released the statement saying that those who undertook academic programs that received prior accreditation, now, even if they have not reviewed these programs, those qualifications will be recognized.
Correct.
And those who are still on such programs, their awards will also be recognized. Okay. How I wish that was pasted at the website.
That recognition is in speech. However, of course, for the cases for which this discussion is based on, is when you do have your student at KIU graduating and seeking for employment opportunities in the diaspora outside the confinements of Uganda, where it is okay by word of mouth. What credit do they have? What accreditation do they have to the security of their education to get those opportunities?
The dilemma is the communication that was availed on the National Council website. Use of active and expired. That's our problem.
Okay.
And so for those programs, all those programs that had been accredited and probably have exceeded their review, and the review is to keep relevance, to make sure it's a best practice actually, and the ED made it clear. He said a review of a program is best practice. You know, so now the issue is those institutions that are running unaccredited programs, definitely that is a death hole. The ones that have been received accreditation in the beginning and are running, that shouldn't be a problem, and that's the clarification.
Let's hear Doctor's response.
No, so for me, mine is very simple. Yes, some mistakes have been done, right? That we should really acknowledge that. Like someone to begin with, the Ugandan, I don't even know if it is a Ugandan or someone, has put something in the public domain. And we live in a technologically driven era, and that can be found anywhere. And that they have done a disservice to this country. That's for sure. It is going to take us years to clean it up, even though it was very, very unnecessary. But also National Council and government, they need to a little bit up their game. The data that this person produced actually somehow tallies with what is exactly there. But what that Ugandan who did that didn't tell the public is that, for example, Victoria University would have one degree called Bachelor of Nursing, which they discontinued, and then they have a new one called Bachelor of Nursing Science, which is accredited, valid there, and they are still coexisting on National Council system. One active, one is dead.
The defense from their side is that no funding, human resources.
Exactly, and that's why I'm coming. That's why I invoked government to come in here. And I said you cannot really blame a cow for not giving you milk when you're not feeding it. Now, government should come in to support these National Councils to have capacity. But you can't say government come in to support, because this is government-based. No, we know the game.
That a government representative, a government regulator.
Priscilla,
so now, government to government.
Priscilla, that is always what we call the ideal and what is the real world. Now this is when we say the Ministry of Education and Parliament actually is sitting on so much power, they can actually instruct that National Council be given the capacity it deserves for them to traverse the entire country to correct this mistake, update their websites, and do a good job. Right now we are blaming them, but they are not in a position to do that. If you have an organization with almost 40 staff, you expect them to do these reviews, coordinate everything of institutions in the upwards of almost 300 institutions around the country. You can only be Superman, Superwoman for you to do this.
Government's defense is going to be
but,
that they're constrained by budget.
But
so
when you look at...
only working within the confinements of budget.
Yeah, but what is happening now, our job, what am I doing here, Professor Mpezamihigo, is to reassure Ugandans that whatever you saw is just another wind that has to go away, ignore. There is nothing that can make a degree expired. Even the international systems you talked about, they have systems. I'm sure with the time they will do some kind of due diligence. They will understand that there was some kind of, because you invoke Cambridge University, it will never produce a document like that. So therefore, our job is to work together, institutions, national council, government, because this is an education system we belong to. We develop programs. Developing new programs on a daily basis, it's the lifeline of this country. You identify a problem, the solution is to develop manpower that is equipped with the capacity to be able to do the job and address that problem. So it is us to tell Ugandans that Ugandans, stay calm, do not panic. This is a non-issue. It does not, no one will ever have an expired degree. It is not possible. And National Council should go back to that website, clean up what the mess that is there. That is the right thing to do. And government should fund them to have enough capacity to be able to return our programs on time. All right? Such that the kind of, and then the centralization, we have to grow up as institutions as well and have more power to have the mandate to review and run these programs, because we do submit reports, Professor, every year. So we can be...
Speaking of submissions, actually, we also want to interrogate fee structures at your universities. So let me get my guests some water to be able to restructure this conversation in the direction of the end user, because we do have to also pay attention to the end user and the end consumer in the education sector right after this break.
You're watching Morning at NTV.
Okay, we would like to hear your own voice on this debate. Hashtag Morning at NTV across the social media platforms. So please do engage and give us your reactions and actions and responses to the dialogue before us looking into universities' responses of the expired, quote-unquote, cases. And we do have Professor Mouhammed. You have been talking about the terminologies here, and I believe in your statement that was released on behalf of the university, one of the things that you talk about is the university, the communication concerns that KIU has in questioning the legality of the terminologies adopted and used by NCHE as re-accreditation of academic programs, expiry of academic programs, and what ought to be the correct English in addressing this issue?
Actually, I think the gap is within the law. You know, what we know as accreditation is fulfillment of the minimum standards which are set out per program. That includes infrastructure, human resource, the curriculum itself, because a desk review has to be done, then an inspection comes on board, you are given an invoice, you clear, the council committees sit, and then the full council sits, and then they issue a letter. That's the accreditation. Now, the issue of expiry and active and reassessment, these are not clearly set out. And the argument is, before the regulation came on board, it was self-regulation, and we've been discussing with Dr. Mugaga here. People even perceive the earlier qualifications as being of best quality. I don't know how they measure quality, but that's what they say. Now, where we have regulations, and nobody's qualifications have been questioned actually, and they shouldn't question them. So a curriculum is offered, somebody gets skills, they are competent enough, they have demonstrated, they have worked for years and decades. Now here, our situation of terminology, the legal framework, because you can't be a regulator who has got, you know, ambiguities that need to be sorted out. And I think really, we really pray that this act that governs higher education, universities and other tertiary institutions can actually be cleaned up and also they can be able to introduce through consultation with stakeholders, they can introduce the categories. For example, as I said earlier, if a significant portion of your curriculum has undergone a major review, then that curriculum requires that a re-inspection is done. So what they call re-accreditation is not anywhere. What they call expire is not, by the way, even active. The program is just accredited. And then a review is a best practice, actually from the press release of the ED. It's a best practice, and a best practice, whereas it sounds to be optional, it's up to you to keep in business. And we know universities are charitable, they are philanthropic, they are not there to make money. But if you do not review your academic programs, you do not match them with the market demand, then you are out of business.
Okay.
And that's the advantage of allowing the autonomy of institutions to manage their curricula, to phase, to merge, but communicate to the National Council. And when we communicate, we also expect National Council to update the websites.
All right. So this brings into the question of self-regulation versus the centralized regulation. With the amendment that came in 2001, and then of course Secretariat and Council coming into existence thereafter, what were they trying to deal with? Because the earlier reality was that each university had its university council to do the same exact job, and it was efficient and effective because these universities had run for a while, especially for public universities. So what is it that they were then trying to either enhance or address at the time of this amendment? Does it still apply today? Is there an amendment that then can review and assess and see that maybe if we go back to the original system, it can work in present day times, Dr. Mugaga?
Priscilla, I've given it a very good context, and which should again reassure Ugandans and the young people who are worried about their degrees. So that before 2001, there was nothing called National Council for Higher Education. That means, and there are a multitude of people who have degree programs, diplomas, and so on. So that means, in the absence of that, it cannot be right that everyone who existed pre-National Council for Higher Education, that their degree program is dead. I don't want to even use the word expired because
expired is the one that has been
because it is not real.
The one that has caused trouble.
Okay, expired. It can't really happen. Okay, we own those universities that existed then. They had a Senate, all right, which is the highest body that is in charge of the academics of every university, and then they had a university council to oversee everything that happens in that very university. And everything, if you ask everyone in Uganda, like Professor Mpeza said, we don't know the yardstick they use. People say the degrees of that time were valuable, people were getting jobs, forgetting that even the graduates were not too many.
And even the population.
And even the population had not grown, right? So, but we didn't have National Council for Higher Education. That means there was self-regulation. Okay, so the intent of then maybe would have to bring National Council for Higher Education could have been to accelerate or increase more quality assurance. Great, yes, but with that, and you have an underfunded institution, you're going to have the chaos we are in right now that is very, very unnecessary conversation to have. So therefore, we have an opportunity that the act is being revised or reviewed, I mean, but we should actually not just massage it or go within this confinement of reform. We should totally overhaul this act, cause transformation where universities are accorded an opportunity to self-regulate. Self-regulation now should come in. The NCHE, or National Council for Higher Education, should be, of course, providing the oversight, okay, provide charter to private institutions because there are minimum standards you have to meet. Now, if you think the university has met the minimum, say 50%, and they are not always going to stay at 50%, they are always going to skyrocket, go 80 something. How then can they end up below the minimum? So self-regulation is the way for us to go, but they can provide this oversight annually. We see National Council requesting us to submit reports, He does, I do, others do, again, to check what is happening. This is the practice they should be doing. But this business of involving themselves in nitty-gritties of programs, we said that if you don't, what is going to define us as universities is simple. What is the worth of your graduate out there? Which problems can they solve? Which impact are they creating in society? Are they people who know things, or they are people who can do things with what they know?
Okay.
So if you succeed with that, then it is us. If we don't do that as universities, we are going to fail.
Okay.
So no one wants to fail.
Let's listen to the academic registrar at Nkumba University. Ivan K. Wadonyo is on ground there, and he's having the same discussion on ground. Let's hear his voice and then return to studio.
Well, thank you very much, Priscilla, and I am coming to you from Nkumba University here in Katavi Town Council, Wakiso District. And of course, we're still discussing the ongoing conversation, what the National Council for Higher Education put out. Of course, giving the information that some of the courses that are being offered at universities are expired. Of course, it's a conversation that has attracted mixed reactions. The heat is still on, both from the universities and the people who finished these courses. Some of them were as early as 2012, but we'll continue to seek opinion and views from the people that are directly involved by what is going on. These are either the learners themselves or the head of these institutions. This beautiful morning, I am joined by the Vice Chancellor for Nkumba University, Professor Jude Lubega, who is also going to give us his take, a view or an opinion on what has been happening. Good morning, Professor, and welcome with me on Morning at NTV.
Good morning, and good morning to you all viewers.
The National Council comes out to list over 100 courses being offered at the university to have expired. What is your take as a university?
Thank you. Our take as a university is that in the first place, the programs are not expired. Some of the programs were discontinued. Actually, 76 of them were discontinued, and they no longer run at the university. Then the rest have actually been resubmitted for reaccreditation because we felt they needed to be reviewed based on the current market demands and after the years, 5 years that had been given for them to run. So it's expected that each and every program.
Professor, let me cut you short. Was it a wrong word for the National Council for Higher Education to say expired?
The word expired, actually, to me, doesn't exist even when it comes to programs. The program is either needs to be reviewed for it to bring in the new current market demands. Because if a program exists, then people who acquired degrees even as far as 40 years back, then their programs too expired because they no longer exist in the universities where they studied from. So programs don't expire. They just get outdated and they need to be updated, and that's how they transform into new programs.
You're saying you submitted some of the courses for review and the National Council has not done it. Do you point that as a weakness to the Council?
To me, it's not, I wouldn't say it's a weakness, but what I know is National Council is under capacity. They need more capacity to be able to do their business. This is why when they are doing all these evaluations across the universities, they tap into expertise from universities to be able to support them in doing the evaluations. So they need capacity to be able to do their job.
Are you in any way affected by the information they put out?
Definitely, the stakeholders have been calling, they are worried, they are in a panic, and I don't know how many calls you get on a daily basis about this. But what I can say to all the stakeholders out there, the students, parents, you shouldn't get into a panic. You shouldn't get worried. Programs don't expire. Programs will continue to be updated. They will continue to be transformed into other new programs which are much, much better than the previous ones. But it does not necessarily mean what you actually graduated in has expired and gone away. Programs don't, degrees don't expire.
All right. That's the word that we need to understand. A friend of mine yesterday was telling me that I should start reading the Luganda Bible, simply because Luganda is straightforward. No explanation. The word they use is what it means. In English, the context change, the variations change depending on the subject matter. So if we were to have NCHE sit here, they'll give you an explanation, then you'll be satisfied as to why they call it expired, even though the subscribers to the council here are not satisfied with the word. But if they give you the context, then we'll understand it. Anyway, they're not here to defend themselves, but of course we do have this gentleman here to defend the cause of education and its consumption. Now let's look into the fact that he has mentioned things that have come out, damage that has been given to the publicity of universities. But one of the things that universities do very well, I commend you guys for, is that there's the fees structure that you share with your potential client, breaking down every needle shilling and as to what it's going to do. And one of those is definitely a fee that goes to the National Council of Higher Education. What's the purpose of that fee, Professor?
Thank you so much, Priscilla. I wanted to say something before I answer this question. National Council as a regulator, and I happen to have served there for 10 years, as I said earlier, measures minimum standards. And in today's crisis talk and the headlines and the global heat because of the use of the word expired degrees, their minimum standard is accreditation. So the review post-accreditation is above the minimum standard. So the minimum standard for National Council is really accreditation. Okay. That's the minimum. But back to your point, actually, students are beginning to ask, because they pay, for every student every year, they're supposed to pay 20,000 shillings. So we did not have this debate like we have it now. And some have come to our offices saying, why should we continue paying? Where is this money going? As he rightly said, Dr. Mugaga, the work is immense. But even us as institutions, we do contribute to the bill. So we contribute actually. A program, for example, medicine, Bachelor of Medicine and Bachelor of Surgery, which Kampala International is offering, recently received an inspection. We even received a report. It cost us close to almost 40 million, which is worth it, because you would like to make sure the regulators, because they also, by the way, combine. National Council doesn't do the work alone. They do it with the professional bodies, the one that registers doctors and dentists, the ones who registers allied health and so on. So National Council should maybe come out clearly and explain also, now that people are beginning to raise the issues, say we are paying our money, and now you are saying the programs we are undertaking in these universities are expiring. So, in fact, yesterday I got a student who really made me laugh almost to the breaking of my ribs. He said, I had a retake. Isn't that retake now expired?
That's a good, that's a nice one.
It's just going to become a joke. and shouldn't we claim a refund? Whereas they are now putting pressure on universities to refund their money for undertaking expired degree programs. They're also saying, can National Council also refund if it's 5 years, that's 100K that I have paid over the 5 years. So it's really a laughing matter, but very serious with regards to the future of people.
Doctor, there's as you respond to that, please also give us an overview of your situation at Victoria University. You have just recently acquired your charter. And that brings into question what you were offering before, the programs that students got before and graduated before you got that charter. Were they null and void?
Before I even
recognized.
Very, very good. Someone would ask a very good question like that. You're right. But before I even come to that question, honestly, we need to be honest here. If you look at the Ugandan higher education landscape, it is characterized by many universities, as we know, and so many other tertiary institutions spread around the country. So we need to be fair to National Council, that sometimes they need that 20K to be able to spread themselves around, okay? And they do that with the minimum means they have, okay? If you look at, and it doesn't necessarily mean that actually even all students are paying.
No.
Now that they even centralized it, that they have to pay in Uganda revenue, they depend on our mercy to enforce these people to pay. Previously, they used to pay through the institutions. Now you pay through URA, so some institutions are not even enforcing. Since they have to walk into URA, we don't have to follow them up. And at the end of the day, they end up not paying. And I think National Council should look into that, right? So, but they need that small money for them to be able to do their job around. Now, coming back to the aspect of all universities that have not been granted charter and those who have been granted charter maybe recently, what is the fate of the degree programs that they offered at that point in time before the chartering? So, like Professor Mpeza earlier said, that, you know, these universities, the National Council always establishes minimum what?
Standards.
Every university, before, as it sets itself up, you are given certain minimum standards to be given the provisional accreditation to operate. So you have to meet A, B, C, D to Z, right? So if you don't meet that, even the provisional license, you don't get that. So all these degrees that are offered, they are offered under the pretext that you have met these requirements provisionally. But they expect you to, when you have to be chartered, and that's how this is the time when I envy public institutions. They don't have to go through this scrutiny, like scrutinizing. They are able to do whatever they want, and no one will be threatened to take away their charter, right? For us, quality has to be up there. And if I were actually the students of this country, I would be rushing every day to go to private institutions, because for them, their survival depends on the quality of the service they have to provide. Less than that, you are kind of, your charter is pulled, your provisional license is pulled. So therefore, the degrees they had before charter, they were valid.
All right. Thank you very much. Now, this conversation is a long one, but I don't have that time to spare. Let's crown it up by getting your views on today's proceedings that are going to be happening in Parliament. The Committee on Education is going to open up a probe into this particular matter. What do you have to say into the probe? Where are the loopholes and what are the solutions, Professor?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think in all fairness, there are delays on the part of the institutions, and also there are delays on the part of the National Council. But National Council being the regulator, I think we need transparency. As you rightly quoted from the circular I issued, at some point I communicated as an institution to the National Council and said we have a danger, you know, we are foreseeing a danger, especially with the use of multiple terminologies that are not really enshrined within the law. So I really think this is a very positive step. And next Monday, we are having also the Uganda Vice Chancellor's Forum meeting. We are hoping the Executive Director of the National Council will also come, so that we harmonize whatever appears as ambiguities, errors, omissions. So on our part as institutions, we need to be transparent. The National Council needs to be transparent. What is at stake is not KIU, is not Victoria, is not National Council. It's the future of the Ugandans. Now we shall be red flagged just because of a use of a terminology. So that's my take, and I want us to take it in good faith, work together to reassure the general public, reassure our alumni, and the prospective students. Can you imagine the timing of this problem?
I know, the timing is so bad.
Is so bad
you
because,
are getting new entrants,
you know, government institutions are
year.
releasing their selection lists. We are busy looking for students. Remember, this is the first time we are going to be admitting A-level leavers because of the lockdown where we didn't have A-level. So what do? You throw everybody into, you know, in the forest.
Frenzy.
Exactly. So that's my message, and and really we hope this probe can actually unearth all the underlying gaps. As institutions, we shall cooperate and try also to make good our part as we comply. My last piece of advice, I hope at one point X, self-regulation will overtake. We shall have minimum standards, but if a university doesn't meet the demand, you know, and I know the justification for National Council was because the massification of universities in the country. Now we have more than 55. Definitely, if you don't regulate them, we shall have quacks and people will be defrauded or frauded and cheated, and that shouldn't happen in our country.
All right, Doctor, time exit has been referred to on national level. We've waited 37 years for time X. It's not yet here, and therefore we still have to exist even before time X comes through. What is the way forward for the education system at a higher level, given the light of this discussion?
I'll tell you one thing, because there's how much more pain can you inflict on Ugandan graduates? They are graduating, no jobs, right? So Parliament has an opportunity right now to cause a rethink about what is really going on in this country. So as for me, I would really ask everyone, stakeholders, especially Parliament has a lot of power, to instead of even concentrating on this, this was an unnecessary conversation. But we also need a communication from government officially. Pronounce themselves that whatever happened was a mischaracterization of some terminologies. So the world out there, please forgive us, don't take it seriously. Disregard. So, and let National Council get that statement posted up there, and it can still go viral for the international community to have that. But that sorted, we should avoid these smaller things. Why? Like accreditation of a program by a bigger body like National Council for Higher Education. This is when self-regulation, when it comes to accrediting programs, should be really given to the universities. But government should also look into funding National Council better. We need them to do a better job. We can blame them all they want. If they don't have capacity, they don't have capacity. But if you empower them to do better, even us, we will do better with even self-accreditation when it comes to these programs. Because no program expires in this world. The world around us, where we try to even benchmark the best practices or the good practices we think they are promising, they have an accreditation council. Once they accredit the university takes over.
All right.
So we need to go that direction.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lawrence Mugaga, for Victoria University sector player, and also sector player from KIU, that is Professor Mpeza, as they've cut it. Thank you so much for your submissions. Of course, now, again, it opens more cans of worms. But this is to our advantage, because information is key for us to make decisions, especially as sector contributors. Parents that have been scared by this information, you do have students themselves that are registering for the next academic year being scared by this information. At the end of the day, just to let you know, you have a right to as much information as you need to make a decision that's going to impact the rest of your life. Closing it at that, Chris again is going to be looking at a review of the oil sector and its progress as far as 2025 is concerned in oil production. Do stay with us.